Liam, you're late. You know it's coupon day. Well, you're here now. Smell this. Well, go on. Smell it. Happy New Year. Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. I guess you didn't expect me to ask Liam to smell something as we go on.
Liam didn't expect to be asked to smell something. That caught me off guard as well, if truth be told. But here we are. What a fantastic start to the new year, being asked to smell something.
Happy New Year, mate. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's a very personal question, like to ask another man to smell something. Yeah. Like under any circumstances, I think it's a bit of a strange one. But out of the blue on a podcast, pretty fucking odd.
So this week we covered 1987's Innerspace. It's a class as a hidden gem because a lot of people don't actually remember this film until you mention it and they go, oh yeah, I forgot about that film. 1987, starring Dennis Quaid, Meg Ryan and Martin Short. Among other famous faces that are in this, of course. It's about a test pilot that gets shrunk down. He's meant to go into a bunny and he ends up in Martin Short's ass. That is probably the best synopsis I can give you on that one.
That's an accurate synopsis.
Haven't watched this film for about 20 years. Yeah, so I watched this film, Innerspace.
Yeah, no, it's a weird one. As you said, I think the strangest thing is when we brought it up is that everybody had almost this like universally same response. It was like, oh yeah, I used to love that film. And honestly, that was how I felt about it. Exactly the same as you. I grew up watching it. It kind of felt like the Hot Fuzz of the early 90s. It was just on TV all the time. And then for one reason or another, it just disappeared. And it's not a film that shows up on TV. I think people liked it growing up, but I don't think anyone necessarily loved it enough to go, oh, I'm going to watch this once every year or something.
Yeah.
But the initial response from most folk we spoke to was that they had very fond memories of this film. And I'm the same as you. I had super fond memories of this film, but I hadn't seen it for over 20 years. And the first thing I thought was like, why doesn't anyone talk about it? I thought maybe it's because of the people attached to it. They've all kind of dropped away. Like Dennis Quaid, he's had a bit of an odd career because he pops up once every 7 or 8 years and kind of sneaks his way back into Hollywood and then disappears again. Yeah, he's got a really odd IMDb.
Lately, he keeps coming back as well in random little horror-ish films where he's the bad guy. Like, I've noticed there are a few of his films at the moment where he just appears and he's the villain and he disappears again for a couple of years.
Well, I'm not surprised like going back and watching this film, the main thing that stood out for me about Dennis Quaid is how insane his smile is.
Oh my God.
It's quite it's a kind of Jack Nicholson-esque smile, but without any of the kind of depth behind it. He just looks mental.
So I had that written down, right? Where everyone always goes on about the fact that Jim Carrey's face in The Grinch is Jim Carrey's face. Like, it's not prosthetics. Oh my God, Dennis Quaid has a rubber smile. Like, when he smiles, it goes further than The Grinch is. It's insane. It's like animatronic.
Yeah, it's like a Joker smile, isn't it? Yeah. It goes like, it is ear to ear, but not in that positive way. You know, you might say about some people, say, oh, he's got a smile from ear to ear. Or, you know, you think of like Tom Cruise and his megawatt style. You'd have to mention it. I know you hate Tom Cruise. But his smile is just pure insanity. And I think he's going for charming. And don't get me wrong, Dennis Quaid is like a really handsome, classically handsome dude. Unlike his brother, which is bizarre that his brother is Randy Quaid, but, you know, whatever. But for the most part, you see him in films and he's got that classic all-American good looks. You know, jaw looks like you could drive a car into, big smile. But for some odd reason in this film, his smile always looks mental. It always looks forced. And I was wondering, is part of it just the fact that this film, I don't know, is it the inconsistent tone? Because I got to be honest, I mean, to get back to my initial point, you know, you talk about why the film's dropped off, I suppose, is that Joe Dante, we don't really talk about him anymore, despite the movies he made in the 80s. Meg Ryan's dropped off, and Martin Short, up until recently, Only Murders in the Building's been a massive hit, which is a great show, by the way, and it's great to see him back with Steve Martin, you know, as someone who grew up with the Three Amigos and stuff like that. It's great to see him back, but up until recently, it feels like all the big names attached to this film have kind of gone away, and I think that's had that impact on the film. But I think the biggest impact, certainly from my perspective, going back to it, is that tonally, this film is absolutely insane. Like, it feels like a movie split between perhaps what the like, I'm not sure who it was made by. Was it, I don't know, if it's Paramount, Warner Brothers, whatever.
It's Amblin, isn't it? Because it's, again...
Oh, it is Amblin. Steven Spielberg presents.
I haven't, until we start rewatching all these films, I never knew how many Steven Spielberg presents films we would watch.
He presents a lot of films.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, especially Joe Dante films, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Like him and Joe Dante were best of friends in the 80s by the looks of this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But no, his name's attached to a lot of these things. And I wonder with somebody, like if you take Joe Dante as an example, is he another one of those directors who was impacted by the Steven Spielberg Presents moniker that was attached to a lot of these films? Because when people see Steven Spielberg, you forget about the name beforehand, unless they're like a really popular director. We mentioned it before on other podcasts, like Gremlins, obviously Joe Dante, but stuff like the Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Or what do you call it? The Poltergeist. I think people look back and just think Steven Spielberg. You don't think Joe Dante, you just think Spielberg.
Spielberg is the name, isn't it? It's the selling point. You can have a batshit crazy premise, which, to be fair, this is.
Oh, yeah.
And you sell it with Spielberg's name, so you give it a go. And to be fair,
yeah. And plus it's Amblin as well.
Yeah, we loved it. I say loved it, maybe loved is a strong word. Have very fond memories of this as a kid. You rewatch it now. I suppose it's the same with, and not as bad as not Innerspace. This is Innerspace. Flight of the Navigator. You have fond memories of Flight of the Navigator as a kid. We rewatched it, and we both basically had a unanimous decision that this doesn't hold up. We weren't fans.
Yeah,
of that.
I didn't love that film growing up, though. I wasn't first growing up with it, and then I disliked rewatching it. This was different.
Well, then you just shit on my whole point.
No. I know what you mean. Though,
point.
Sorry, man. That's not what I meant to do. But I totally know what you mean. Though. You have those films where sometimes they don't add up. But this film, like, I loved growing up.
Yeah.
But I mean, make no mistake, this has been the biggest disappointment of the Hey You Guys era for me. 100%. Oh, 100% for me. So, in terms of what, like, I'm amazed how many of these films, because I thought going into this podcast, when we started it, I thought, there's going to be a handful of films where we're both going to love them. Predator, Die Hard. Like, I've seen them a bunch of times. It's not like I haven't seen them for 20 years. I watch them once every few years. I know I still love them. And the exciting bit was just talking about them again.
Yeah.
But there are certain films where it's just like, Flight of the Navigator is a perfect one, or even something like Masters of the Universe, which we did a few months ago, where I was like, I haven't seen that for a long time. I have such fond memories. Am I going to go back and this is going to, like, not wreck my childhood, but, without... You remove rose-tinted glasses, which we try and do on this podcast, and suddenly you're like, this film's really bad, or you don't enjoy it. But I've been surprised at how many of these films we've gone back to and I still enjoy them, or the ones where I've never seen them before, like, to use it, two recent examples, Buckaroo Banzai and The Race, two films I'd never seen, I had zero attachment to, and I thought, oh man, going to watch these films with no nostalgia attached, I was like, I'm not going to enjoy these. I really was expecting not to enjoy those films. And I thoroughly enjoyed both of them, especially Buckaroo, obviously.
I think I've got another one in the pipeline that I don't think you've watched. So buckle your seatbelt for that one.
Oh, well, I look forward to these. But like I said, this one, though, I was convinced. I was like, I'm going to enjoy this. Like, I knew it wasn't a masterpiece, but the reviews, if you look on IMDb, stuff like that, they're pretty strong. I like the names attached. And I was just like, yeah, I'm totally going to enjoy this. And I watched it with my wife, and we both said, like, about 40 minutes in, we're just like, is this bad? I'm like, I think it is. There's don't get me wrong, there's good stuff in it. But I think the biggest issue with this film, going back and seeing it, is, as I said, was that disconnect between, say, selling it to Amblin or whatever. They were just like, even if you look at the poster, you would go into it and think, it's a sci-fi romance. You've got handsome Dennis Quaid, and he'll get with the, you've got like the comedic sidekick in Martin Short, and, the love interest of Meg Ryan, they'll have an adventure, they'll end up getting married, stuff like that. But the reality is, I think Joe Dante wanted to make a Martin Short vehicle. Like, this is a Martin Short film. So you have these moments where you've got Dennis Quaid with his crazy smile doing all the heroic stuff in the ship. And then you've got a full-on slapstick comedy, which bizarrely turns into a Bond parody in the last 30 minutes. I was sitting there, I was like, this is insane. I was like, how many bad guys are in this film? There's about 72 bad guys. Yeah. So it's such a weird film. It
is a disjointed film. Like I said, I haven't seen it for about 20 years. So when I went to rewatch it, I don't think I had as strong feelings as you did. I didn't enjoy it a lot, but there were things that I could take from it. It's probably not one that I'm going to rewatch again anytime soon as we move forward. But I mean, we'll get to whole Robert Picardo as a cowboy later. But I really
my God.
I really wanted to highlight something that I've completely missed previously in other viewings, and again, probably because 20 years ago, then Innocent Head and all that. And we'll also get to obviously Mr. Ego, played by Vernon Wells,
Jules Verne. Oh, yeah. Jules Verne. Vernon Wells. Sorry, Jules Verne. They're both mental names, but yeah, I apologize.
The one thing that completely missed me was his dildo attachment.
Yeah, I mean, he and is it Dr. Kanker?
Yeah.
Is that her name? Yeah. I mean, they are clearly fucking. There's no two ways about it. And he definitely has a dildo hand. Yeah. I mean, again, talk about kind of your classic 60s, 70s Bond spoof. You know, he's outrageously evil. Sorry, you've mentioned Ego now, and I'm totally in on this in his dildo hand. He is like buffoonishly evil in this film. Like everything about him is... He goes on such a clear journey of the classic Bond. I mean, a lot of the times he carries himself like the Terminator almost. Like, you know, completely emotionless. The way he walks, like there's no way he hasn't seen the Terminator before he goes into this film. And obviously he's got previous with Arnie.
87. So has he already teamed up with Arnie, or was that was 88?
Was it the same year? I think Predator was 87. I might be wrong.
Yeah, not Predator, Commando.
Commando. Sorry, yeah, Commando was 85.
All right, well, the one thing it was 85, yeah. So the one thing I will say about Vernon Wells in this, or Jules Verne as we're going to call him from now on.
Yeah, we'll go with that, yeah.
Is the fact that he lost his Commando pot, because Jesus Christ,
he's in good shape.
Slimmer in this one, yeah. But how do you not, like, he's wearing all black, he's wearing the glasses, he's got the leather gloves on, but
he's got the car.
Yeah. Oh, with the snap-on license plate, which I thought was...
It's a cool car as well. Yeah. For 1987, that is a dope BMW. It's a really cool car.
Has his hand in a gun shape already. Do you know what I mean? Like, his prosthetic hand is already the finger and thumb gun shape. Like,
yeah, well, that is the thing. Talk about looking kind of like inconspicuous. It's like you say, he's got the gloves. His hand is in a gun shape. His skin looks like it's made out of plastic. I don't think I've ever seen somebody look so blatantly evil. Like the worst undercut. Like if someone's chasing you, like you don't want it to be that guy. Like, you know, they have the classic 80s mall scene. And to say he stands out like a sore thumb would be an absolute understatement.
Yeah.
But then nobody in this film is going for subtlety. And that goes down to like who he's chasing. Is it Dr. Ozzy? So like early in the film, like, you know, you get introduced to Dennis Quaid's character, Tuck, is it Tuck? I think. You know, they kind of quickly imply that he's, you know, this great pilot who's lost his way. He's a drunk now and all that jazz. He's got a shitty apartment. Although there's something that happens like when you're, you know, in your late 30s, early 40s. You're like, oh god, he's got a bit of a crappy apartment for, you know, a hotshot pilot. And then you realize it's in central San Francisco. You go, oh no, that apartment would cost about £4 million, so he's doing just fine. But they don't beat around the bush. Like, they quickly go, okay, we're going to shrink the ship for no apparent reason. It's just because science. And we're going to inject it into a rabbit. And all of a sudden, the bad guys kind of come out of nowhere. And there are so many of them. And there's the big chase scene where Dr. Ozzy, and I don't think anyone has ever looked more fucked on screen than Dr. Ozzy. Yeah. Like, fair play, he runs a bit, and then he steals a bike and cycles for a little bit. He looks more fucked before he gets shot. Like he just looks like he's about to have a heart attack at every single moment. It's bizarre.
What I love, sorry, you're on about Dr. Ozzy. Before we moved on from Dr. Ozzy, I can believe that they managed to shrink somebody down, put him in a syringe. I can believe then that this person flies around inside a body and is able to do things like look through their own eye or hear through their own ear, things like that.
Yeah.
I can believe all that. Journey. What I can't believe is the indestructible syringe that Ozzy has just in his pocket as he's doing everything you just said. He is cycling, he's falling over, he's jumping over a bloody, like that aqueduct thing whilst the guy is chasing him. And then just after he injects Jack, then the syringe drops to the floor casually and shatters.
Yeah, a lot of everything about that is insane. For one, it must, I mean, how blasé they are about that syringe. You know, you've got to assume that this is the top secret kind of like operation. You know, they're miniaturizing. And as they make clear, it's like, whoever has the power of miniaturization, you know, has the power to rule the world or whatever nonsense they kind of, imply later on. But the syringe is just on the side. It's not like in a room. It's just kind of on a tripod, like in any kind of, science GCSE lesson. The whole thing is so kind of half-baked. And I know what you mean about the syringe, but my biggest issue with that scene is the fact that all the way up to this point, they've been establishing that Jack is this massive hypochondriac, massive hypochondriac. So then he gets injected by God knows what, by a fucking stranger in the middle of a mall. And do you know what his reaction is? Nothing. It's nothing. Work. He just goes to work. He doesn't give it a second thought. If I got injected by a guy in a lab coat who then subsequently died on the floor, I would go, oh my God, I've been injected by Ebola. I'm going to be dead in the next minute. I was like, if ever you had a reason to be a hypochondriac, it's that fucking reason. And the quintessential hypochondriac doesn't give a fuck. It's bananas. Like, it's so weird.
And that was what my quote at the beginning. All right, I changed my quote a little bit to include two quotes and you. But
no, that's quite right.
When he walks through the door, and he's
creative liberties are absolutely fine on this podcast.
When he walks through the door, he's like, "Well, Jack, you're late. Come on, it's coupon day. Like, isn't every day coupon day? But okay, you bring him through." And then that old woman with the manager made me laugh. There's no context. It's just smell this. Go on, smell it. What are you doing?
No. Everything to do with Jack, as I said, it's bizarre because it's being sold as a sci-fi kind of action comedy, but really it's this weird Martin Short vehicle, and it means that they have these almost kind of like SNL style sketches throughout the film which don't fit the tone. Like the bit when he keeps having the dream about the till, the really lame like dream, and when it actually happens later on in the film, when he's scanning things through and it's all going through as like £1 million, and that's his fever dream, and everybody blames him. It's like, oh Jack, what have you done? What has Jack done? No, the till is clearly fucked. Well, like who would be stressed about that if you put through a packet of chewing gum and it came up as like £1 million? You'd be like, oh, that's weird. And everyone would laugh about it. Go, oh, I'm not paying £1 million. But everybody takes it really seriously. Like, whoa. I don't carry that kind of money. No shit, lady. And everyone's, oh, Jack, you fucked everything because the till isn't working. It's really strange. It's really strange. And it runs throughout the whole film, these weird tonal inconsistencies.
Of all the people in this film, and I know we haven't done love-hate, and that we get to the end for love-hate, which I've got to actually apologise to you later, but we'll get to the end of that first.
Is it just going to be, I hate Tom Cruise for no apparent reason? I hate Karate Kid. Of
all the people in this film, who do you hate the most?
I don't know.
Can I go?
I go.
No, can I go?
Oh, I thought you said I go. I was like, no, I don't hate Igo. Igo's great. Go for it.
Fucking Wendy.
Oh, yeah. Wendy.
Oh, my God. She is. I mean, I don't know if we've ever used the C word on this podcast, but she is one big C word.
She is a C word.
Oh, my God. Like, it's insane.
It feels like she should have had a bigger part almost. And I know she's just there to kind of establish the fact that Jack has gone on an emotional journey, that he's become a different man. But she is horrendous.
Although
she's horrendous all the way through.
She did give me one of my piss myself laughing moments in this. When they're in the office, she's got no reason to come into the office. But she comes into the office with a cup. You're thinking she's bringing him a nice drink. And she went, I got it down the hall. She laughing.
She is an asshole from beginning to end. Yes. I mean, I think everyone's a bit of an... the thing is, when you said, like, who do you dislike in this film? I mean, I actually really like Meg Ryan. And it's quite bizarre. Like, when you see her in this film, I actually think she looks a bit like Emma Watson does now, just with a really bad 80s haircut. But I was like, oh, man, she looks a lot like Emma Watson. And I really do like Meg Ryan, and late 80s, early 90s Meg Ryan. Before, sadly, she had there's no coat for your face, Meg. It's the same with Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan, two of the most beautiful people from like the late 80s and early 90s, and they've just gone too far with getting the work done.
They've done all right, haven't they? Because their son turned out to be quite a handsome man, didn't he? Jack.
Yeah, because they've got fantastic genetics.
Yeah,
they've got amazing. They're beautiful people who have just gone too far with the plastic surgery.
What the fuck happened to Randy? Randy Quaid.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, usually you think of like extremes. You think of like Ron Howard and his brother. Like Ron Howard isn't a particularly handsome man, but he looks like a normal human being. And then you've got his brother who looks like his brother. But this is a weird one because Dennis Quaid does have, as we say, crazy smile aside, quintessentially all-American leading man good looks. Randy Quaid does not have all-American. Isn't it strange that both of those brothers that we referenced are both in The Wraith?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just all the weirdos got put in The Wraith. I'm wondering, is there like a handsome film where Ron Howard and Dennis Quaid are in a movie together? They probably are somewhere along the line.
Do you know what makes me think, though? It's real-life twins, isn't it? Where all the good stuff, all the good stuff went into Arnie, and then all the like the what did Danny DeVito say? All the crap went into me.
All the crap that was left over. Yeah. That's what Randy Quaid is. Well, Randy Quaid's a lunatic, but I mean, he's had a good acting career.
God.
He's had a good acting career.
He had a good acting career, but if you want, what he thinks. I mean, we're not going to get into. That's a whole of a podcast, the whole mafia of Hollywood after Randy Quaid, but he has gone insane.
I guess an interesting question there is, because I think Dennis Quaid has had, obviously, the more kind of classically leading man roles for obvious reasons. But I think if people look back, like, who's had the more memorable career? Is it Dennis Quaid? Or it is Randy Quaid,
Randy
right?
Quaid, yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt. Randy Quaid has been in more of the...
Independence Day?
I would say popular films and stuff than...
You talk about now, 20 years later... Like literally over Christmas, I watched Independence Day and I watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. He's not the leading man in either, but he plays a prominent and memorable, for better and for worse, role in both of those films. Yeah. Whereas obviously we've gone back and watched this film for this podcast, but generally speaking, when's the last time I watched a Dennis Quaid movie? And as I said, it kind of speaks to that weird career he's got, where it's like, he popped up in 2004, The Day After Tomorrow, midway in 2019, which obviously wasn't a hit at all. It was like Parent Trap in 98, Frequency in 2000, Enemy Mines in 85. I know I've used a weird kind of date range there, but I think it goes to show that he's just one of these guys that he just pops up every 4 or 5 years just to remind you that he's about. Yeah. But he's never actually established himself as a kind of a big name, despite the fact that he's been in some big films. Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying, "Oh, I love Dennis Quaid," but I think, oddly, I think a lot of people are probably going, "Oh, I fucking love Randy Quaid." I love Randy Quaid.
I was going to add something which gave gravitas to what we were talking about, but it didn't really work because I was checking out how many acting.
We could do with a bit of gravitas on this podcast.
I was checking in bed again how many acting credits that they both had, and Dennis Quaid has had 102, and I thought, Randy Quaid's had to have been in, but he's only been in 118, really. I mean, so...
But again, more memorable roles. Well, certainly in films that have stood the test of time, I think. Yeah. I just think they're a bizarre set of siblings. They've both had Randy Quaid has had maybe the exact career you would expect of a guy who looks and acts like Randy Quaid, and you would say he's probably done... I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean this, he's probably done as well as he could have hoped in terms of getting the kind of roles he would, he's not a leading man. Like, that's a fact. Whereas Dennis Quaid, you've had these moments in his career where you're just like, if his next film's a hit, he might kick on and become one of the big leading men in Hollywood. And it never quite happened. Maybe it's that crazy smile.
Randy Quaid was the robot in Pluto Nash.
Oh, he was. He was. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's definitely a mark in the negative column. I mean, if anyone hasn't seen or isn't aware of Pluto Nash, it's actually it's a bizarre one because it was so low key, because everyone involved in it knew it was such a piece of shit that it got swept under the rug. But it cost millions. I think it's in the top 10 biggest box office flops of all time. And usually when you think of biggest box office flops, you know the film because you're like, oh, it had a massive budget and it's like Pluto Nash. I don't even think it got a cinema release in the UK. It's a bizarre film.
You haven't said who starred in it, Mike. We said Randy.
Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. I mean, like it's an Eddie Murphy vehicle.
Well, I had the weirdest relationship with this film because when it came out, obviously this is before the internet was popular, but I used to buy movie magazines, and I felt like I was relatively up to scratch on the movies coming out. And I went to Paris, and it was one of the first times I'd ever been abroad. I was like 15 or whatever at the time. And there was this massive poster in the center of the city with Eddie Murphy, who was one of my favorite actors at the time. Because, I loved Delirious. I loved Raw. Obviously, you and I, we both love Golden Child and Beverly Hills Cop and all that jazz. And all of a sudden, I see this giant-ass poster for Pluto Nash. I'm like, what the fuck is... I'd never heard of it. I'm like, this is one of my favorite actors. I was like, is this a spoof? Because it looks like a spoof poster for a start.
Yeah.
And I had to look, and it was only months later because I don't think it got a UK cinema release. And obviously, I was like, "What is this film?" And I watched it on like VHS or DVD like a year later, and you found out why it didn't get. It is terrible.
It is a massive pile of POS. Like it is awful. Really is. It is terrible.
Especially when you consider the talent involved, we could turn this into a fucking Pluto Nash podcast. So we're gonna get off subject pretty quick.
It still kind of holds up with the special effects.
Oh yeah, they're still really good.
Like they're still really good. The one bit that did make me laugh was there was a scene where it zooms into Jack's body, it scans the pod, and as it scans the pod, it's like they've basically taken a picture of Dennis Quaid and pasted him onto a model of the pod. So basically where the window would be, it's just a picture like they've copied and pasted, and it looks...
The scale's all wrong. The scale is all wrong. Yeah,
because it looked like he would be busting out of that pod.
100%. Well, it's just one of the things in terms of like the technology, and obviously, we've already mentioned the tone, but even the technology in this film, it has such odd logic throughout the film. And it's like that logic is held together by a complete piece of string. It's like nothing, I appreciate this as a fantasy comedy and you just go along for the ride. But so much of it, you're like, does this make any sense, even in a film about a guy being miniaturized and shot into another man's body? But that scene aside, as you said, with the his face being apparently cut out and plastered onto a kind of CG shot, well, not a CG shot, just a kind of
it's got to be a miniature,
a base miniature shot. The effects, I think, inside the body are actually really good. I actually think it's a shame, like going back and watching this film, like in my head, I thought a lot more of this film was set inside Martin Short's body, inside the ship, like, because that's, I think, what stuck in my mind were those special effect shots from the 80s. Because in 1987 in particular, I mean, it was really impressive. There was no other film like it. I can't remember another film which went for these kind of almost like Ant-Man-esque shots, but obviously inside the body. And then I went back and watched it. I was like, oh, this is cool. This holds up. And then I realized it's like 3% of the film. And the rest of it is just Martin Short acting like an asshole. Like, like if you take one scene in particular, like you've just had this amazing shot where he goes up, where he shoots the claw into the eyeball. That still makes me wince. I still think it looks great. It's really impactful. It makes my toes curl. Another scene soon after, which made my toes curl for a completely different reason, was the drunk scene, which was one of the worst scenes I think I've ever seen in cinema.
It's a great song. I love that song.
It's a great song, but the song's ruined as well because now it's attached to this one of the worst drunk scenes, one of the most believable scenes of inebriation I've ever seen committed to cellular. It's appalling. He apparently has one drink and he turns into a psycho. And not only that, you have to remember at this point in the film, he's just been told, Dennis Quaid, that he's got 24 hours to live, essentially. It's like your oxygen is going to run out in 24 hours. So what do? We go and get drunk together and have a lame little party in your apartment. It's like, aren't there more pressing matters? I hate everything about it.
I'm glad you brought that up because I had a question written down for you. Would you drink something that I've put in my mouth and put back into a glass for you? Because that's theoretically exactly what just happened.
Yeah, and I'm guessing at the kind of the cellular level, which you're talking about, I mean, how tiny he is. I'm pretty sure that if he did capture some of that liquid going down, that it's not just going to come out tasting like fucking whiskey or whatever it is they're drinking.
There is saliva in that drink already. There is a lot of stuff you do not want to be having.
There's so many problems with that scene. And the way he dances on his own, again, you know, that whole thing about the tonal inconsistencies, about this being a kind of an excuse for Martin Short to just act like a lunatic. I watching Martin Short, and I love Martin Short, but watching him dance when he's drunk in that scene makes me want to punch him in the face a lot. Like not in a jokey way either. Like really, I'm like, I kind of want to beat the shit out of him when I see that scene. It's horrifying. And then of course, again, those inconsistencies in the film, he just then magically slaps himself sober. Like, you know, like Dennis Quaid, we just keep calling him Dennis Quaid rather than his character's name. But he just says to him, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you can slap yourself sober. That's a real thing. That doesn't work. You just end up slapping yourself and you're still drunk.
Of course it's fine to slap yourself sober after you've got drunk off one swig.
Yeah, I guess so. When you're pretending to be drunk.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Right.
Oh my
and
God.
You said,
but at least you think he would have just kept a bottle of alcohol rather than having to steal alcohol from him. I mean, when he opens, he's got like a case in the ship. And he's got all kinds of weird shit in it. The one thing I did really like, and it made me oddly nostalgic, is that he has a box of chicken McNuggets in there.
Yeah.
But it's in the old, I'm not sure if you remember them, the old styrofoam boxes that they used to come in.
Dude,
and I was just like, oh, that's cool. I remember those.
I was a McDonald's employee in the late 90s. So yeah, I remember.
Oh, so yeah, you remember those. Yeah. And in fairness, I was like, surely you wouldn't take food onto the ship. I was like, chicken McNuggets are indestructible. I've eaten chicken McNuggets 5 days after I bought them in the past. They're exactly the same. They're cold, sure, but they taste the fucking same because they're not chicken nor nuggets. They're just something. They're just food-ish. Let's just put it like that.
It's sort of like an edible part. It's like chicken nuggets are people, like Soylent Green people.
It is a little bit Soylent Green-esque.
We're actually in the Soylent Green universe now, aren't we? 2022 is Soylent Green.
Well, we're definitely on the dystopian timeline. If someone told me that I'd actually been eating humans for the past 2 or 3 years at this point, I'd be like, it doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me at all. It probably wouldn't be the worst news that I got in the last 2 weeks. I'd be like, all right, whatever.
You said
I was like, is everyone else been doing it? So, yeah, everybody's been eating humans for the last 2 years. I was like, well, as long as it's not just me, let's just carry on.
Well, they do say it tastes like chicken. So, I mean, you got to go with that.
Yeah, well, if someone told me out of the blue, it's just like Big Macs are like 5% human, I'd be like, and then someone said to me, it's like, do you want a Big Mac? I mean, if I was hungry, I might still say, yeah. I mean, I love Big Macs, man. I don't know what you would have to tell me to get me to never eat a Big Mac again.
It's when you turn around and you go, Big Macs, yeah, 5% people. All right, no pickles.
Yeah, no pickles, bro. Like, at this point, I'm like, to 100% stop me from eating McDonald's, it wouldn't have to be that they're just made from people. It would probably have to be made of people that I know. Like, it would have to be personal. It's like they were like, well, that Big Mac, that's like 10% Dave.
Yeah.
Or something. I'm like, oh. yeah. I was like, Dave's dead. He's like, oh yeah, Dave is dead and 10% of him is in this burger. If he's already dead, I don't want him to go to waste. I may end up eating anyway. So
Dave will no longer be on this podcast because apparently he is now a Big Mac.
He is a Big Mac. He's many Big Macs. So, and that's no criticism of him as a person. I think any human would make numerous Big Macs. I think it's fair. So I don't know what the human to Big Mac ratio is. Put it that way.
We got to.
Yeah, we've got to move on. Okay, yeah.
You said about we got to say his name. You said like we keep saying Dennis Quaid. What a name, mind. I mean, it's a typical 80s hero name, Tuck Pendleton.
It is a crazy name. I actually quite like the name Tuck Pendleton. That does sound like a pilot's name.
Yeah.
But it quickly gets pushed aside amidst the other, I mean, Dr. Margaret Kanker, Igo, Victor Scrimshaw, a.k.a. Sub-Zero, the Cowboy. This film is awash with absolutely bonkers names. The only close thing, like Lydia and Jack, they're relatively normal names.
Yeah.
But then, don't get me started on Meg Ryan's character. I don't know what the fuck's going on there, or her hair for that matter.
Let's go to the Cowboy. Come on, we got to get to the cowboy.
Well, that's the thing. We will get to the cowboy, but just to be clear, you do feel the same way as me, right? That there are far too many bad guys in this film. Like they're so overblown. There's the super sexy Dr. Kanker, like she's filth, and obviously she's having sex with
everyone. I mean, yeah, she's using
with everyone.
She's using Igo as basically a sex toy at this point.
100%. Yeah, he's a giant male sex toy with.
She's trying to get out, like Jack. Like everyone hinted that Jack's not the best guy in this film, like best looking guy or whatever. And like she's, oh no, I want Jack as well. Like she was.
Everybody wants Jack.
She even flirted with Ozzy.
Yeah, she just flirts with. Right, so she's filth. Then you've got Victor Scrimshaw as Sub-Zero, and his ridiculous dog as well, and his glass house mansion, whatever the hell that is. I don't know what's going on there. Then you've got Igo, obviously, and you've got the cowboy. At this point, I'm like, as much as I enjoy the cowboy and what's his name, Robert Picardi's performance, which I think is fantastic. His dual performance, I think he's better at playing Jack than Martin Short is at playing Jack. We'll get to that. But I'm not convinced the cowboy needs to be in this film at all.
The cowboy is active in another film completely. It's like he didn't even know what, like, and the whole thing as well. You said too many villains. The storyline is so paper thin with this whole chip thing. Like they're selling the chips on anyway. Like we're going to sell the chips on because the cowboy's here to buy the chips.
But why they don't need that?
But just in case the cowboy doesn't buy the chips, we have a lab setup that we can use to shrink some. Like they were already trying to sell the chips to the cowboy before they decided to shrink anything. So why have they got a lab setup?
It's the two films that keep clashing. There's, on the one side, you've got the Dennis Quaid, Meg Ryan sci-fi action comedy, which has the big Bond villains and all that jazz, and obviously has to have the big face-off in his body. But then on the other side, you've got the Martin Short SNL sketch. So, of course, why not have the fucking cowboy? Why not have Sub-Zero and his ridiculous dog? Why not have them half miniaturized and turned into dwarves halfway through the
film? Who's calling this dude Sub-Zero as well? Like, he's calling himself Sub-Zero.
He calls himself Sub-Zero, but the cowboy in particular, and I think it was one of those, I brought it up on the Gremlins podcast, that they didn't follow through with the lady who apparently owned the town. Oh, yeah. I forgot her name. But the one thing she had, she was so evil, she was so over the top, that she ended up having her own theme tune. And the same thing happens with the cowboy. Like, not only the tone of this movie shifts on the cowboy's appearance, but the audio shifts. He has these ridiculous audio cues all the way out throughout the film where they're just like, oh yeah, this is turning into a buffoonish comedy for the next 10 minutes because the cowboy's on screen. It's such a swing for the fences to have that character. And again, this isn't blaming the performance of Robert Picardi, who I think is really good. He's clearly been given a clear direction on this. I just don't think it sits in this film. It's fun, but it's from a different film.
When he's just wearing his boots and he's drying his hair and he's like, yippee-yi-o-ki-yay. He doesn't even know what he's doing.
You can imagine, say you're in like a meeting and in your writing room, you're in like a writer's room for like a TV show in particular. Yeah. And they've got like 20 people. And you're like, all right, we've got this idea for a character, the cowboy. And you have one of those, like those bubbles. So it's like the cowboy's in the middle. You have all the lines going off it. And it's like, oh, we can have all these cool little character traits. And everybody in the room gave their opinion. And they gave 20 individual character traits for this one character. And then Joe Dante said, yep, let's go with that. And they were like, wait, which ones? All of them. We're going to have all of them. He's going to love this weird-ass music. He's going to wear his cowboy boots when he makes love. He's going to have the weird fucking hair. Just every single thing. Oh, the cigar. Yeah, we'll go with that. It was just like every single idea that anyone mentioned for the cowboy, they said, just put it up on screen. He is... Yeah, it's a strange one for sure.
Yeah, it is.
Before I get too carried away,
it gets to the point of parody as well. When you got, like you said, you got the Bond 100%. Parody with Mr. Igo. Well, actually, it's a lot of Bond parody. Mr. Igo, Sub-Zero is like Dr. No kind of thing. You've got
yeah. But then, like you say, like they're all of a part. Like the Doctor, Sub-Zero, Dr. Igo. Excuse me. They all feel like they're from a Bond movie from like the 60s or 70s. what film is fucking The Cowboy from? Like, again, he just feels like an SNL sketch, sorry, just attached on at the end. And he just completely clashes against everyone else in this film, other than maybe Martin Short.
There's absolutely no point for that storyline other than to try and get them the chip. That's the only reason. Like, the cowboy's in there because something big is happening. You only ever see the cowboy come into town when there's something big happening. Mm-hmm. The only reason is to get him and Martin Short in a room together and swap the chip, but also to get Robert Picardo to play Martin Short playing the cowboy.
It goes full on face off, and again, in and of itself, those scenes work. The only other reason I can think that he's actually there is because they were like, well, we've got Meg Ryan in this film, and we need to have a reason for her to be around. So just by chance, she's investigating the cowboy. Like, it's got nothing to do with the rest of the plot. It's just completely a complete coincidence that she's got a huge interest in the cowboy and what he does. And it's like, all right, that doesn't really hold together, but we'll just go with it because we need to have Meg Ryan and Martin Short in the same place, and we need to give her a bit of agency, despite the fact that, again, it doesn't make sense. Also, the hair doesn't make sense. Well, maybe it's the 80s, whatever. But like you said, like, it doesn't make any sense, sure. But then you do have those great scenes. Yeah. Like when he turns into, again, you talk about special effects holding up. It actually reminded me quite a bit of Total Recall.
Yeah.
So my cat has just jumped up on my lap.
I wonder what that was. Like, just you just had this big black thing, just like the tail of the cat just erect up.
Yeah. You probably didn't, he jumped down pretty quick, so you didn't get like 10, 15 solid seconds of Bryn's asshole on screen. Yeah. So that's something at least. But yeah, the scene when he turns into the cowboy, the whole 2-week scene from Total Recall, it really reminded me of that. And there's actually a great one shot when he transforms and then comes out of the bathroom, and it's all done in one shot. And supposedly, like, he ran around the back, they used a double and stuff. Yeah. It's a really smart scene. But as you already mentioned, I think the most impressive thing is actually Robert Picardi, firstly, playing Jack, who he does incredibly well. Like, I really did believe, I was like, oh my God, that does feel like Martin Short in another person's body.
Yeah.
But then goes, oh, and Bryn's back. So I have a cat on my lap again. But then, like you said, it goes full on face off where Robert Picardi is playing Jack and Jack is pretending to be the cowboy. It all goes a little bit Inception-y at that point. But again, it's quite fun. It doesn't belong in this film, but it's entertaining all the same.
I'm thinking, I'm just looking at the time now, we better move on. So is there anything you want to close the film out with before we move on to the next sections? Because there's one thing I wanted to mention.
Well, the thing is, and again, you talk about something summing up the tonal inconsistencies of what really kind of rubbed me up the wrong way going back and rewatching this film with the final action sequences. So on one side, you've got Igo, who suddenly got this total like RoboCop 2 style suit, which again, they just by chance had ready in case things went south. So he gets shot into Jack's body as well, so that he can have like a big face-off against Dennis Quaid's character. It still looks cool, and it's a full-on CG fight fest, and in 1987 it would have looked amazing. And at the same time, you've got what on paper is, there are actually a couple of half-decent stunts, but a chase sequence in San Francisco in which Sub-Zero or Dr. Scrimshaw and the Doctor have been reduced to 50% size. Yeah, 50%. And there's this whole, and it's so kind of like Three Stooges. It looks, visually, it's the worst thing in the film. It looks terrible. And again, those two tones, those two action scenes are clashing at the same time. And I remember watching it and being like, this is making me angry. So not a positive note to end on, but I really did think that final action sequence where you had the two things happening at once really summed up everything that I think is wrong with this film going back and watching it, which is a shame because, as I said, I have such fond memories of it. But I hope you have something more positive to end on at least.
Not really, no.
Oh, shit.
Shining your spotlight into your underdeveloped baby's eyes. When the baby comes out and going, I'm sorry, but your baby is blind. Well,
your baby's blind. You're pregnant, but also your baby's blind. And again, sorry, but that just I mean, kiss swapping, I felt like we could have gone into that, but we'll leave that in terms of like...
How quick is he getting back up to where the saliva is so he can jump across bodies?
Yeah, and again, that whole thing about the logic in this film kind of barely hanging together. But after obviously you have the action sequence, and I've spoke so many times about the fact that I think that some people funding this film had a very different idea of what this movie should be, from Joe Dante, who obviously apparently wanted to make a Martin Short vehicle, is that by the end, despite the fact that, they clearly had an awkward relationship, all of a sudden, Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid are getting married at the end. They don't actually spend any time together in the film. Okay, he spends literally a small amount of time inside her body, but they don't have any kind of, their relationship doesn't progress throughout the movie. All the time she spends is with Martin Short. She actually kisses Martin Short. And then at the end, they're like, well, of course we're going to get married. It's like, it was almost as if they've sold it on the idea we're going to get Dennis Quaid, we're going to get Meg Ryan, there'll be all this adventure, and then they'll get married at the end. And then we're just like, well, we promised that they'd be married. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but does the cowboy make any sense? Good point. Get him married.
But what's that time frame as well between being made bigger to getting married? Because they kind of make you feel like, come on, that's a big wedding to plan in probably 2 days or however long it's meant to be.
Yeah, totally.
Because he's given them then his vacation tickets to the cruise. For some unknown reason, Jack's boss and Wendy, who don't have any interaction with Tuck or Lydia, are at the wedding, along with Jack's doctor.
Yeah. It was just everyone in the film. So everyone in the film is going to be at this wedding. That doesn't make any sense. I don't care. Get it done.
Because it made me feel like the length of time, there had to be a certain length of time for then Tuck to introduce Jack to the family. Because the way then Jack is interacting with one of those flower girls, like he's rubbing her head and he's playing with her.
Yeah.
And it's like, hang on now. What's going on?
Well, and again, you talk. I didn't even think about the time frame, but now that you mentioned it, it's insane. And again, it's amazing that it didn't even click to me that it's like, why are all these people at Dennis Quaid's wedding to Meg Ryan? That doesn't make any sense. And I think they even kind of suggested earlier in the film that if it was kind of like going in like deep sea diving or something like that, that there'd be a pressurization issue. So he'd have to depressurize before he could get out of the ship.
Yeah. But
of course, they've just abandoned that because apparently he was getting married 2 days after they got... it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Very little of this film makes sense. Obviously, I was able to let that go when I was younger and I was won over by the special effects. And, again, I was, a fan of Martin Short. But going back, this film just didn't hold together for me. And it's not like it's terrible. It just didn't work. So it's almost like I want people to go back and watch it, but I also don't want people to go back and watch it because I feel like maybe it should be left back in the 80s. And maybe it's one of the reasons that it hasn't stood the test of time. That a lot of people haven't gone back to watch it in subsequent years. Yeah. But again, it's a strange one because people have such fond memories of it. But I did have fond memories of it. I don't anymore, sadly. But never mind. Never mind. That is the danger of this podcast. So yeah. Love and hate. Facts? Okay, yeah. Are we doing the love and hate thing or not bothering?
Oh no, we can do love and hate. Well, actually, let's do love and hate because I have to owe you an apology for this one.
Yeah, I thought it was only, honestly, I usually skip over love and hate. I thought of it, I'm not even sure about it, but you mentioned it earlier, so I'll tear through mine quick. Love, the effects still stand up. Seeing San Francisco on screen is always fun. And I do, despite the fact that the character doesn't make much sense in the film, I love Meg Ryan. Late 80s, early 90s Meg Ryan. I think she's so charming. There was a reason that she was a megastar. She's so incredibly likable on screen. In terms of hate, Meg Ryan's hair, Jesus Christ, they really did give her an uphill battle there. The inconsistent tone, which you've already mentioned, and the car chase and the little people at the end of the film, which I absolutely, absolutely despised. So, Jesus Christ, I just need to get off my chest.
Before we go into mine, I'll rattle them off quickly. We did Lethal Weapon, and I had a text message off a frequent listener, Dan. And the text message literally just said, it's usually 3. And this was a week ago, mine. So I texted him going, what are you on about? And he said, your love hate. You usually do 3. You argued with Liam for 5. So I owe you an apology because on Lethal Weapon, I made you do 5 Love and Hates, but apparently we only ever did 3.
I did say at the time.
Yeah, I know.
I said at the time it was always 3, and you're like, also, no, we do 5. We definitely do 5.
The next message came along and saying, it's okay, though, because I heard a lot of glasses in the background. I'm assuming whiskey was involved. So,
yeah. Fair enough. So, we were pretty inebriated at the time, so we'll let that one slide, I think.
Yeah. So sticking to the usual that we do, which is 3, not 5. Mm-hmm. I could have sworn I was right.
Yeah, no shit. It's amazing how alcohol does that to a person. It's like, no, I'm definitely right. No, I think that's the boost.
And it was more than one swig that jacked her.
Well, put it this way: like people have made bigger mistakes while under the influence of alcohol than saying, "Oh, wait, no, I'm pretty sure our love-hate section has 5 points rather than 3." I don't think you have to explain that to the wife the next morning. You know,
no,
you've got away with that one.
So the 3, we're going to get to in a soundtrack, but Sam Cooke's "Cupid." I love that song. I am in love with that song. I think it fits for this film. The effects, especially like because they were practical, like the fat cells were like just balloons full of like jelly or whatever. I thought they were great. And the location, San Francisco as a backdrop, is so beautiful. It's so good.
It might be outside of perhaps New York, the most cinematic city in movie history. And obviously, it's the hills, isn't it?
A lot more as well, isn't it? Like you notice it a lot more in films as well now.
It's just because it's so. I mean, New York, because we've seen it in a bajillion films, but New York, like San Francisco, like when I went there a few years ago, a big part of it for me was just seeing stuff I'd seen in movies. Yeah. It's like, in the same way that New York is to a certain extent, it feels like visiting a giant movie set. And there's just something about San Francisco and those rolling hills. As soon as you see them, you know exactly where you are. There's nowhere else apparently quite like it, and it just feels cinematic. And it totally works in this film.
So hate, Wendy, I've already said, can't stand her.
Yeah, I'm amazed I didn't have her in my top 3. Wendy is a bitch.
The logistics of traveling between spit and kisses and everything else, I don't know how that's going to work, especially like considering he was just in her uterus. But okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, sorry. I have to bring this up. I know we've already moved on, but you mentioned like the inconsistencies of the kissing. At the end, when they're trying to get him out of his body, they get him to sneeze, yeah?
Yeah.
He sneezes, and just by chance, he lands on the doctor's glasses. If he doesn't land by chance, if he doesn't sneeze in his face and he lands on his glasses, what then? They never find it. No. They never find it.
Somebody has actually just stood on him. Like,
dude, if he sneezes anywhere else than at his fucking glasses, it's the end of this film. It's like, oh yeah, well, he obviously just ran out of oxygen. But anyway, sorry, I digress. My apologies.
No. What was my third one? I did have it ready as well. The explanation of this is a taser gun. It is capable of delivering. What are you doing?
Yeah. What are you doing, Meg? What are you doing?
She is reading the leaflet. She is reading
the manual, and she's got it pointed. This is a taser gun. Yes, gun.
No, I appreciate that. Tasers are probably pretty new back then, but I just because we all know I'm watching this thinking this did not hold up. It did not.
There's a lot of problems with this film, and that's just another one to add to the list, if truth be told. Facts.
Yeah, I am very prepared for facts. Hang on.
No, nice. Okay. Well, I only have one. Somebody said that, and I'm not sure if there's any truth to this, but supposedly it was the first selfie on screen.
Yes.
It's early in the film when Dennis Quaid's walking through to the ship, and he takes the Polaroid camera, puts it up to himself, and some people are suggesting it's the first selfie ever. I'm not sure if that holds up, but I've heard it, and I'm going to go with it. So there's something. So, there's my one fact, my one and only fact.
So I'll start with facts. Like I said, there's not many. My first fact, many people say Thelma and Louise is the first selfie in movie history. but right before Tuck Pendleton is shrunk and put in the syringe, he grabs a Polaroid camera and does a selfie with one of his co-workers. So that was my
Fuck you, Thelma and Louise.
Yeah.
That shit film.
Dennis Quaid and Meg Ryan met on the set of the film and dated from there. They later married in 1991, but divorced in 2001.
No, because I can tell by your tone. Usually when we're watching these films, my wife looks at the facts and she goes, "What is it with this film? There's no facts. Nobody talks about this film anymore. Nobody gives a shit." And as you were reading that fact, you just kind of tailed off, just like, I just don't give a fuck.
Like, I've tried to find, like, because usually there's reams and reams and reams of facts.
Yeah. There's fuck all for this film.
I mean,
it's the movie that the world forgot. It's bizarre.
All of the cells seen outside the pod were in fact made out of jello, according to Peter Curran, the special effects supervisor. This is the only film directed by Joe Dante to win an Academy Award. It won Best Visual Effects.
What a shit. This guy made Gremlins and The Burbs. Two films we've done on this podcast. Two films which 100% held up. The Burbs is still a fantastic film. The Gremlins. Why do I keep adding that to things? Gremlins is still a fantastic film. This is not a fantastic film.
Well, you mean The Innerspace.
The Innerspace, yeah.
So, during the Cowboy Putter changeover, Robert Picardo had to do quite a bit of work. After Putter has been changed, we see Lydia asking how he got into the room. The first time Robert goes off screen, he's actually rushing behind camera, tearing off his breakaway clothes and getting into the bath. Meanwhile, a stand-in moves into frame from the left, who is seen from the back. A makeup assistant is behind a fake wall at the head of the bath, having just changed the Putter wig to the cowboy wig. Before the Scrimshaw meeting, Picardo's voice was overdubbed with Short's during the meeting. Picardo used his own voice with a Short-esque tilt, as the filmmakers didn't think Short trying the cowboy's voice would be convincing enough to make the scene work. Jesus Christ. I mean, that's the most thing in this film, because when it comes to
impressive. It works.
Impressive as hell, yeah.
It really is impressive. And as you said, like that in terms of a performance, I think the best performance in this film is actually Picardo as Jack. I think is fantastic.
When they are shrinking Tuck Pendleton, the lab's instrumentation shows a reading on the screen that is 6 interlinked hexagons, 2 top, 3 bottom. This is the symbol that the Combined Miniature Deterrent Forces, or CMDF, also used in the movie Fantastic Voyage.
Oh, cool.
Oh, we didn't mention him, Mr. Putterman. Dick Miller, who plays the cab driver near the beginning of the film, is a favourite actor of director Joe Dante. They worked together in several films, including Gremlins and Small Soldiers. Yeah, Mr. Putterman, taxi driver, yeah.
And it had, is that Dick Miller? It also had, what's his name, Henry Gibson in it as well, who played the Doctor in The Burbs.
Oh, yeah.
He's the guy who, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's fine as the guy, his employer in the supermarket.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to always remember him as the Doctor in The Burbs.
They also had as well, Tuck is first talking to Jack, and Jack's in the waiting room. And he goes, "You talking to me? Are you talking to me?" To these two people. The man he's talking to, I can only remember him from Happy Gilmore. He's Jackass Man.
That is exactly, I was looking at him, I was like, what do I know him from? I was like, from Happy Gilmore, of course. I'm sure he's been in a bunch of other films. But I was just like, I'm sure he was standing next to Adam Sandler at some point. But
he will always be Jackass Man. Oh, do you want to go to Red Lobster?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Rance Howard, father of director Ron Howard, makes a cameo in the supermarket checkout line. He's the guy behind... I think he's the guy behind the red-haired lady.
Isn't that weird how we kept bringing up Ron Howard and stuff earlier, and his dad's in it? I had no idea. Bizarre.
Mel Gibson and Robin Williams were considered for the part of Jack Putter. Can you imagine Mel Gibson as Jack?
As Jack?
Yes.
Maybe as Tuck, not as Jack.
Yeah.
Although, again, I'm not saying Mel Gibson, but maybe this film is a different film if it's not a flat-out physical comedian. You know, if it's a different kind of film, if it's more of an everyday man, perhaps. But yeah, Mel Gibson's a strange one for sure.
This could have been a very different film because at one point John Carpenter was attached to direct.
I mean, yeah, I'd love to see the John Carpenter version of this. I mean, I was thinking of maybe like the Paul Verhoeven, like go on full body horror with this film. That, you know, there's a lot of very different versions of this film because I think the concept is actually really strong, and I don't think Joe Dante made the most of it, if truth be told. But yeah, there's the potential for very, very different movies here based on who's directing it for sure. Rick
Moranis was considered to play Jack Putter. Obviously,
that makes more sense.
Yeah. He later did something similar with the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids stuff, but.
I think he would have been a great fit.
I think he would have been good at this, yeah.
I think he would have been really good. He fits the part. You don't have to change the movie so much, but I don't think he goes quite so overboard on the physical comedy. I think, you can still play the whole hypochondriac role, him finding himself, his inner strength, no pun intended or any of that. But I think maybe this is arguably a better movie with Rick Moranis in it, personally.
Could be. A bit of foreshadowing. If you pay close attention to the scene at Lydia's desk when she's on about the cowboy, you can actually spot an ultrasound image of the baby pasted over Tuck's framed portrait, teasing the future reveal. So that was quite a nice little Easter egg that obviously I don't think anybody saw.
No, I certainly didn't.
No. Mr. Ego has no lines in the movie. However, Mr. Ego does scream in the battle with Tuck when he falls into Jack's stomach, acid, and digested alive. Mm-hmm. That is a telltale sign of I could barely find any fucking facts for this film when I tell you that Mr. Ego has no lines, but he does scream.
He does scream, yeah, that's the best fact. But no, honestly, it was the same thing. It's amazing how little information there is on this film. Yeah. I'm sure if you wanted to dig, go on a real deep dive, you could find something. But yeah, there is, most of these films, as you said, you look them up. We do our usual bit of research. There's too much information. You've just got to kind of pick and choose. What are we going to talk about over an hour, hour and a half, whatever. With this film, it's just like, man, I've really got to go out of our way here because the information is just not there because apparently nobody gives a shit out of this film. Everybody just goes, oh yeah, I used to like that film, and then forgets about it again. Nobody goes back and watches it, except for us, like psychos, and we go back and watch it and go, it's not actually very good anymore. So leave it, like you said, leave it in the past. Leave it in the past. Leave it in 1987 where it belongs.
So that was my last fact. So do you want to move on to soundtrack?
Well, the thing is, usually we talk about legacy at some point, and just to be clear, there is none. Like there's no legacy for this film. There's no sequel. Nobody talks about it. There's nothing online. This is the first one we've gone back to where the legacy is none. The only thing I'll say is, and you've already kind of alluded to it there, where how different this movie could be if it was made by John Carpenter or if it was made by Paul Verhoeven. You talk about films from the 80s which are due a remake. I still think the premise is great. I think there's a great movie in here. I'd be interested in seeing a remake, and you could totally take it in any direction you saw fit. Yeah. But but even that's not part of its legacy because nobody's talking about a remake either.
I don't think they'll do a remake for that because they're still trying to get Fantastic Voyage done, which is basically the same thing, where two scientists shrink down in a ship and go inside a body. So if they do that and it kind of sells, maybe they think, there is like some scope for an Innerspace as well. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Maybe, bit of an odd one. But yes, score. I mean, you already mentioned the soundtrack. Obviously, you're a bigger fan than I. I mean, what I was really listening to was the score. And it very much had that kind of 80s fantasy comedy, the sound of Amblin, if you will. Yeah. And it was actually Jerry Goldsmith, who's popped up a few times on this podcast. He did Poltergeist, The Explorers, Rambo, Star Trek. This really wide body of work. And he's scored a huge number of films, and probably a number of films that you probably love or have an attachment to. But I don't think many people talk about Jerry Goldsmith in the same way that you talk about other composers. But I actually think the score for this film is perfectly suited to, again, what I think the film maybe should have been, the more kind of action-adventure side of things rather than the cowboy and his kind of unique soundtrack. So, but this guy is not only the sound of kind of Amblin, he's the sound of Joe Dante, or certainly of his films. This is the guy who did The Burbs and The Gremlins, and those same kind of motifs pop up, certain characters having very distinct scores for themselves or soundtracks, whatever you want to call it. And I think that runs through that. I don't think it necessarily always works, but I think his core scores, at least, are actually really good. And I think this is another really successful one. I don't think everything in this film works, but I think the score is fantastic. And as you said, you certainly like the soundtrack anyway. Yeah,
I do. But I'm a fan of 50s, 60s rock and roll, so I always have been.
Yeah. No, and again, it works in this film. And I feel like I'm shitting on this film largely because I had... Yeah, I am. That's true. But I think a big part of that is an expectation thing. Yeah. I had such fond memories of it, and I had no reason to believe that I wasn't going to enjoy this. I hadn't seen it for a long time, but again, Joe Dante, Dennis Quaid, Meg Ryan, Martin Short. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to enjoy this. I was like, the only thing I was worried about is like, will the special effects hold up? The one thing I was worried about, I didn't have to worry about because they held up. It was everything else which was the problem. And it was I just sitting there, just like, oh no, this is bad, but it's not bad enough to be fun. Yeah. Like The Wraith. The Wraith is a bad film, but it's a fun bad film. It really captures that 80s absurdism. And you're watching it like, this film's insane, but I loved it. Whereas this film's not ridiculous enough to really fall into that category, but it's not good enough to work at the other end. And it just kind of sits in this kind of like 2-star limbo of just not being all that great. Spoiler alert, by the way, I'm giving it 2 stars. Yeah, there you go.
I love how the Wraith has captured your heart.
Oh, it absolutely has. Dude, the 2 films you've got me to watch, The Wraith and Buckaroo Banzai, have 100% captured my heart. This hasn't. So yeah, next anybody tries to bring up Innerspace, I'm like, fuck Innerspace. Watch Buckaroo Banzai and The Wraith. You'll have a much better time.
Yeah.
The last section we usually do is video games.
Yeah.
There was no video game for this, which is, again, a little bit surprising given the setup, I suppose. But I think there's a perfect example of what could be done here. I'm not sure if you've heard of a video game called Subnautica. Yeah. It's a relatively recent video game by Unknown Worlds Entertainment. It's a really good kind of survival game where you're in a craft and you're underwater and you've got to pick up what you need to kind of, survive, but to continue exploring. I think you just take literally the same game, the same engine, only instead of the sea on an alien planet, you just put it into another human's body. And you could move from a human body, you can move into animal bodies, all these other things. But what you could do if you're really going to commit to the cinematic side of things is that you could have almost the 2 things playing at once. So you're playing you're inside the ship, inside a body, but you have a screen in the top right where you're seeing through the eyes of the body that you're in at the same time. And of course, anything that happens to that person or to that animal impacts you in the world, i.e. inside the body at the same time. So you can still have the kind of survival elements, but you could also have that narrative built in, connected to the outside world. And of course, you could have the whole kissing thing, despite the fact that it doesn't make sense, swapping between bodies and stuff. But I thought that was like the perfect example of how you can make a video game, to the point where I convinced myself, I was like, that sounds really good. I wish I was playing that game. Because Subnautica is already a great game. You're just adding a cinematic narrative layer on top, and I think it would really work.
No, I like that. That sounds better than my idea, because I like the cinematic of it. But my idea, I was going to go down the action route, where it'd be a side-scroller, like R-Type style game, where you're the ship and you've got to go through. That's pretty cool as well. I guess invading cells or other miniatures that have come into the body and stuff like that. Yeah. Almost like you're doing kind of medical procedures almost. Yeah. Oh no, that sounds really cool as well. I think in terms of like a 2 for 2, I think that might be our best combination of video game ideas. If you're going to do an Innerspace video game, I think both of those are gold, personally. Well, you could do. I'm happy to. I was going to say blow our trumpets, but I'm not. That sounds a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, let's keep our trumpets. I would like to strike that from the record, please, sir. Edit that off. Yeah, we'll get that going. Yeah. So in terms of scores and can I guess what your score is? Yeah, you go for it. I mean, so yeah, I'm unsurprisingly, as already mentioned, 2 out of 5. And would I encourage others to watch this? No. I would say if you have a connection to this, if you have fond memories of it, I would suggest leaving it in the past, personally. If I was speaking to people who hadn't seen this film before, again, I don't think I'd tell them to watch it. Like I said, it's not a terrible film. I just wouldn't encourage anybody to go and watch it. I just don't think it's good enough nowadays. And as I said, for like us, loads of people have such distinctly fond memories of this film. And I'm just like, just leave that where it is. Leave those rose-tinted glasses on and just forget about watching it in 2022. So, that's where I'm going, unsurprisingly. I wasn't, like I said, I mean, rewatching it again, it didn't give me the magic that I remembered, or I thought I remembered when I watched it previously. I don't think I'm as bad with it as you are, like a 2-star. But again, you're going to hate this because it's not a 3-star either. It's a 2.5. It's a middle of the road. I totally, this is one of those times where I totally get it. Like, I know sometimes this feels like a cop-out, but it's weird between 2 and 3 in particular when you're using a 5-star system, because 2 feels resolutely negative, whereas 3 does feel like a recommendation, doesn't it? Whereas it's bang on. Like, I've said 2, but I mean, I am bang on a 4, And I totally understand you wanting to give this a 5, as in it's just bang on, straight down the middle of the road. Not fantastic, not terrible. I totally understand. But it's the only time I am going to understand that. Otherwise, I'm going back to the 5-star system. Would I recommend it to others? Probably not. Keep your nostalgia where it belongs, I think, with this one, because even though I really remember enjoying it as a kid, it kind of lost its luster for me. a little bit.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we seem to have the same. It's just maybe it's impacted me more, and I think based on our conversation, a lot of that it comes down to the fact that I maybe have a stronger attachment to it than you do.
Yeah.
From when we were younger, and I think honestly, based on our opinions and the way we talked about, that's the only difference. I think we largely fall on the same side. It's just I had higher expectations going in, so ultimately I've come out more disappointed. But you know, whether you're talking 2 stars or 2.5, whatever, the fact of the matter is, it's okay. It's not great. It doesn't particularly hold up. It's tonally insane. But do watch the scenes with the cowboy online because they're pretty fucking awesome.
So, Innerspace, it's one of those random ones because we were starting a new. We had a bit of a big break. We both decided to do Innerspace. It wasn't like it was my idea, your idea. We both decided to do that. So. We've decided that, well, I've decided without telling you that next week's your choice.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I already know what I want to do next week. And it's going to, I feel like I'm rolling the dice a bit on this one again because I loved this film growing up. I know it's not a fantastic film, but I have very fond memories of it. But I'm going to go for Transformers the movie. Now, this is the animated one, not the Shia LaBeouf one from 2007, obviously.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, obviously we'll go into greater details next week, but there's so much to talk about. Whether we go back and enjoy it or not, the cast, some of the choices with like the core characters, the soundtrack, oh my fucking days, the soundtrack for this film. So yeah, Transformers movie is actually one I've been looking forward to doing for a while because it feels like I have this massive attachment to my childhood, and I have no idea how this is going to hold up, but I'm really looking forward to rewatching it.
It's going to be super interesting because I could tell you I've seen this film once. In the 90s.
Oh, yeah. So you're talking... Yeah. So that's what I watched it a lot when I was younger, but I haven't seen it for a long time. And I know there's stuff in it that I unequivocally love. I've already mentioned the soundtrack, some of the actors involved, somebody very famous's last role in this. Oh my God, which is, Okay, we'll get to it next week. We'll do it the next week. But no, I mean, as always, thanks for joining us for Innerspace. Please do join us next week for Transformers the movie. And I think that's about it. I mean, I could moan about this film for so long, but I think we'll call it there. I think we've done. We've done more than enough damage to people's nostalgic memories for this film.
All I will say, as we start 2022 now, I've got quite a few ideas of the films I want to approach, and I'm pretty sure you do too. So I'm quite looking forward for this year now because there's going to be quite a few films that I think we didn't have a chance to do last year. So I'm looking forward to the next year.
I mean, obviously we're going to keep picking out some like obscure ones, and I would argue that Transformers the movie is relatively obscure to a certain extent. But there's still a huge number of absolute beasts we haven't done. We haven't done any of the Terminator films. We haven't done any of the early '90s stuff. Jurassic Park, any of that nonsense.
Beverly Hills Cop we haven't touched.
Beverly Hills Cop. That's another massive film for both of our childhoods. So, but we'll get to those eventually. But in the first instance, after a Christmas break, we're back to our normal weekly recording now. Short of a disaster. But Transformers next week. So thanks again for listening, and catch you guys later. Cheers.
Thanks again. Bye now.
Oh yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review and leave us some 5-star ratings as well. But make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1 star. 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't move smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.